Welcome. Welcome to your Joyful Riches podcast, where you gain precious tips and tools for creating the life you love, even if you are facing adversities. This podcast is delivered alongside the International Childhood Cancer Charity, where we empower in addition to emotionally and physically heal impoverished disadvantaged children with cancer globally, one child at a time. And for this week, we are so thrilled and honored to have Lynne with us. Lynne, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you care to share with our listener what is it that you do?
Well, thank you, Birgitte. First of all, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to share what I do in the world and to applaud you for all that you're doing also. So I have spent over 40 years in the field of, I would call it, empowering other individuals. My career earlier was as a social worker, and when I transitioned out of that prior to the pandemic, I went on to take yoga training and sound healing, because I really am an advocate and believer of healing holistically and healing body, mind, and spirit. So I wasn't able to proceed with my plan of creating a business in that field because the pandemic was upon us. But it was an opportunity for me to maybe listen even more deeply in terms of where my next work was, and I became a life coach, and I worked at that throughout the pandemic. I'm transitioning out of that now because I've written what I feel is a very inspired book about transformation. I'm in the process of writing another one, and as I move into this stage of my life, I'm passionate about speaking to others in terms of our own ability to heal ourselves, and especially to promote mental health and wellness.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I love that. I can tell how you're passionate in helping others when we connect first. And you share a little bit in a way your journey, but what brings you to start with to as you mentioned, you become a social worker and then to become an author is what you said, and a transformational specialist, a transformational coach. Is it like something you always kind of like grow up and say, hi, you know what? I think I want to become an author and even a social worker and doing some healing and life coaching and all these things, or is it something that you discover along the way?
Well, I would say that it's something I discovered on the way. I certainly was not on this journey as a young teenager and young adult. I grew up in a home with quite a bit of dysfunction, and I believe it's been my own evolution, my own journey, my own trials and tribulations, my own adversities that have really affirmed, the power that's within each and every one of us, that's breathing us, that's helped me to see how resourced I am. And I really feel that my own journey has happened so that I can share and inspire others to believe in themselves when they're going through difficult challenges. So as I share on my website, I'm actually a cancer survivor. And I would say that I had started this journey prior to that, but had some real awakenings at that time and found the spiritual principles and universal laws that I live and that I believe in sharing with others. In the world.
Yeah, I recall when you connect with me, when you reach out, you said you are a cancer thriver. And just a survivor, but a thriver. And I love that. I love that because sometimes we say, how could you thrive when you have cancer? How could you possibly thrive when you have something impacting your life and it's changed you forever? And it's so easy to sometimes become fearful and become scared and become depressed. Understandably, as we are going through things, it's normal emotions. But what do you find in your journey? And actually, before we get there, even you mentioned about book that you wrote and then that you're writing a second one. Would you care sharing with us a little bit about your book, because it's a children's book, isn't it?
It's a children's book, but it's got what I believe is a very powerful and universal message. And it's really teaching the coaching principles that I share with adults, but in a children's version and, of course, the condensed form. And the beauty of this book is it speaks about the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly. And nature is just brilliant. And I think as human beings, we don't realize that this nature is within us. This becoming is within us. So in my little book called What If You Could, it's the story of a caterpillar who can think. And I always have fun unpacking and sharing this with others, because we know that nature doesn't think. It just is. It just does. And so in my book, this little caterpillar has a longing for more. And when I coach people, often when we have a longing for more, we have discontent with our current conditions, these are really signals to grow. And if we could start to see them that way and welcome them as an opportunity to grow and move beyond where we are now, I think that we would embrace it in a bigger way, because the only thing that is constant in this world, in our lives, is change. And it can be scary to move forward. And often we tell ourselves, I should just be grateful for what I have. My life is good enough. But in this book, the caterpillar, and because he's following the cycle of a caterpillar, he's had his life on a branch. He's eaten leaves for 3 weeks. And without this story, we know that he's going to hang upside down. He's going to spin a chrysalis or cocoon. And with the time that it takes for the breaking down of everything that's caterpillar to become butterfly is the transformation. And when we think about the idea that this little caterpillar, I often think if somebody landed here from another planet and we said, here's a caterpillar, and this is the result, this is what it's going to become. If you didn't have that knowing, it would seem pretty audacious to think that this little fuzzy caterpillar will become this beautiful butterfly. But that's exactly what happens. And so he starts to think about what he would love. And he's also, at one point, as he's hanging upside down as a caterpillar, is starting to look around at the life around him. And this, to me, is a very powerful metaphor for living your life from a vision, instead of just being driven by the conditions in front of us. And I know that when I've gone through difficult periods of time, we are driven by the conditions and circumstances. Sometimes we feel, and I felt that way, tossed around by life. And I just had to, kind of hang on as tight as I could and see where it took me. But I was introduced into vision-based living after my cancer diagnosis, when I did make a decision to thrive. And for listeners, I'll just share that this decision came, and I believe we all have those defining moments, when I was very afraid of my future and how it would unfold. With my cancer diagnosis, my marriage unraveled. And I know that sometimes this happens for people when there's a very adverse circumstance that we're dealing with. I was a single parent all of a sudden. I was unemployed because I had been in business with my now ex-husband, and I didn't know if I was going to live. And I had 3 small boys. And I was preparing my house to move into soon. I was over one evening working in the bathroom when I had a fall. And when I landed on the floor, which I was actually up on the countertop on the floor, I stayed there and I thought, you have been so worried about cancer being what is going to end your life. And really, this fall could have done it. It was a real pivotal moment for me, because I realized that none of us know when we're going to take our last breath or what's going to cause us to leave this physical experience. And at that moment, it was just so clear to me that my life was finite. I might have 5 years left to live. I might have 1 year left to live. I might have another 50. And I'm happy to say that this was 25 plus years ago. So I just made a decision that night that because I didn't know how long I lived, and because I didn't know what was going to be my take me out of life, I guess, that I was just going to live my life in the best way that I could. And it was shortly after that that I was introduced to vision-based living. And I don't think any of this is a mistake. I believe that when we have our attention on how we want to live our lives and how we want to move forward, there's an energy in this universe, and we start to draw in the resources that are going to support us to move forward in however we decide. So back to my book, this little caterpillar is looking around, and I think he's now looking up and out and for what's possible. And he decides that he would love to dream, he'd love to fly. He'd love to be eating a different experience of not just leaves, but beautiful, tasty flowers. And to be so beautiful, not this drab little butterfly, that he could, share his beauty with the world. And he has this beautiful vision, and it comes from his heart. He hears from a voice when he's not knowing how to move forward that says, if anything was possible, what would you love to be? Use your imagination, and just set yourself free. And we've been gifted with this incredible mental faculty of our imagination. And so we often, though, especially when we're navigating something difficult, use our imagination to terrorize ourselves. Very easy to think of everything that could go wrong. And now this little caterpillar is thinking about what he wants. But when he wakes up from this vision, he starts to hear from another voice. And this is the one that I love to share and speak about, because I believe it's important to normalize the voice of fear. Fear, doubt, and should will show up, especially when we're moving beyond what we know. And so he hears from this voice that basically says, well, who do you think you are? How's that going to happen for you? Flying, drinking nectar? I mean, look at you. You're this little caterpillar on a branch. And felt very shut down after he heard from this voice. And again, it's so important that we understand that this voice is there for all of us. And when I speak about mental health, and to me, mental health is our ability to navigate whatever we're going through with some semblance of balance, peace of mind, not going to worst case scenarios, because none of us know ultimately what the outcome of anything's going to be. And just to really trust the process. And so I'll just quickly let you talk here in a moment. So when he's feeling this and feeling like, how can this happen? He hears again from the voice. And this is the title of my book. And the voice whispers, but what if you could? What if you could have this experience? Believe and the way will be made. So that's the storyline. And in the end, of course, this little caterpillar becomes a butterfly, and then invites the reader to lean into what they would love.
That is awesome. I love that. I love the what if you could, and the caterpillar become a butterfly, and that's so beautiful. Now, would you mind sharing? Perhaps you mentioned briefly. And would you mind sharing what do you mean by, or giving an example to our audience? You said something like, we use our imaginations to terrorize ourselves. And what is that? Can you give an example? And what can one do to not terrorize themselves? Because I can't imagine anybody want to terrorize themselves.
No, and our thinking happens at a very subconscious level often. Apparently, we think 80,000 thoughts a day, approximately in that realm of numbers. And they say we're probably conscious of about 10% of our thoughts. So there's patterns, there's beliefs. You may have grown up in a home where your mother was a worrier. Sometimes we equate worrying with love. And I just think that the voice of fear, whenever we're growing, it's there. So for me, it's like, well, am I going to live to see my kids grow up? Am I going to find a job? There was all these what ifs. Or I think about when people say, well, I don't have an imagination. Well, if you've given your teenager a curfew to be home at 11 and it's 1 a.m, your imagination is working very well. I've had that situation where you're already seeing police cars or an accident, or the doorbell ringing. We can easily go there. And so first of all, just acknowledge that voice, when we hear from fear, it's in a sense, we have to have a respect for it because it's trying to keep us safe. Our voice only knows so much. So when your son or daughter doesn't come home, we don't know what the unknown is. And so we're trying to almost fill in the blanks. And I think, first of all, just acknowledge, and especially if you're moving forward to a new way of life. So for me, I'm creating a life now as a single parent, just acknowledging all the what ifs, the fears. And one of the things when I coach people is even, write them down, stare it down, call them out. The work that I do is not about doing a spiritual bypass. These things that are coming up for us feel very real. So a great tool is just to write down everything you're afraid of. But then I also invite people to ask the question, first of all, is this happening right now? 99% of the time it isn't. And I think it was Mark Twain who says most of what we worry about never happens, but we can really get carried away. And then that's where we're putting our attention. We're putting our attention on worst case scenario. So just to notice that, write it down, see that. Is it happening now? No. And then to even write out, what do I want to happen? What would be the best case scenario? And we can create scaffolding images. So images, even if it's just for that particular day, of what I would like to turn out. So even people going through a cancer treatment, you know what? Often we're going into it very afraid, and even happened. You and I had this conversation a week or so ago about sometimes we can make ourselves sick before we actually go in for the treatment. And that's the power of our ability to create images that scare us in our minds, right? So why not focus on what you would love to happen? And then every time you catch yourself, so awareness is the number one tool. This is a power tool that we need to develop when we're transforming our lives, is to become aware of our thinking. Am I feeling, we all know how we feel, sometimes we don't know what we're thinking. Am I feeling contracted right now? Am I feeling small? Fear, that's what fear does to us. And then what is a thought that would make me feel more expansive, and go with that. So those are tools that I like to use. Just acknowledge the fears there. And also a beautiful mantra when we're moving into something we don't know, even if it's navigating cancer, that's a big unknown. What if there's a growth opportunity in here for me? What if there's good trying to emerge in here? And I believe that most people, if they use it well, transform through adversity. And when you hear many great people's lives, people like Oprah, they've had very difficult and challenging experiences that they've had to overcome in their lives. It's not because it's been a cakewalk. It hasn't been easy.
That is very true. A lot of people that did go through challenges, and some people, well, we know that the well-known Thomas Alva Edison.
Yeah.
You have to discover the way to use electricity that we all now enjoy, including right now. Without it, we wouldn't be sitting here chatting. So he was told he was unfit and too stupid, and so that how about that? And thank goodness that he doesn't listen to that, right? And so, but yes, we do go through a lot of different challenges and adversity. But I love how you do you say that, notice sometimes we tend to notice the worst and imagine the worst, and at the same times we want to be able to see what is it that we would love. And yeah, as we have in our conversations, and you mentioned just now, even if you are going into a cancer treatment, for instance, you could be thinking about the worst possible scenario, and then you'll be all tense. And in a different scenario, it could be even if you're going to a job interview, right? It could be a cancer treatment, or it could be a job interview, or it could be presentations that is very significant to you, and you can, as you mentioned, you can be going into it and thinking, this is going to make me sick if it's cancer treatment. Or if you're going into a job interview, you could be saying, okay, you know what, I have 5 other interview that didn't work out. This is not going to work out. This is not going to work out. Or a presentation, well, last time they hated everything I say. Oh, I haven't been having the best year in this at work this year, or any of those. And then we would go in there with feeling tense, feeling fearful, feeling already defeated. And even like you mentioned this, which I just love, where you said, you know, if you go into cancer treatment, if feeling all tense, it will make your vein kind of all twisted and hard for them to get blood and to put in an IV, versus if you are more relaxed and seeing what it is that you love that to happen with that moment, with that day, is something I teach my clients, moment to moment. Just go with one moment at a time. And that is beautiful. That is beautiful. So where do people find more information? How could people find your book? Where can they find your book?
Well, if they just go to my website, then there's links there for buying my book. It's available on Amazon. There's other platforms that will show on my website. And so my name is Lynne, L-Y-N-N-E. Many people don't spell Lynne with an E, but I do. And my last name is Harley, H-A-R-L-E-Y, just like the motorcycle. And the other invitation I have for anybody who's listening is I've created a companion journal, which is a free download. If they would like to subscribe to my newsletter, then they'll be kept up to date in terms of what I'm doing, where I'm speaking. I'm in the process right now. I'm actually in Mexico, and I've just yesterday have signed the contract to put this book into Spanish. And I'm in the process of writing a second book, which is called Do It Afraid. It's the sequel of this one. I'm changing my butterfly to a monarch butterfly because this is where the monarch butterflies hibernate as they fly all the way to Mexico. And the more I'm just learning about this tiny little caterpillar to butterfly cycle, it is a miracle. And I think that that's what we need to embrace as human beings, is that if there's an energy and a power that can cause this it's apparently the most highly evolved migration. And again, it's like, if this energy is available to this little caterpillar, why are we so reluctant to embrace it and have faith in it? And so the companion journal is a great way, if you're an adult, to see the metaphors in my children's book that you can apply to yourself and start creating a vision for what you would like moving forward. A very, very powerful way to live is vision-based living, as opposed to being tossed around. You know, I have a vision of a little rowboat out on the big waves. And when we're living by our conditions, we're just kind of wherever the wind blows us, whatever happens, we're always in reaction mode. And when we learn to come from our vision, we can live in a very responsive way to life.
I love that. Do it afraid, and that is a beautiful thing. And yeah, the monarch butterflies definitely has very fascinating cycle and migration state. Now, what questions I have for you, as you say, living in a vision-based living. Some people say, you know, I don't even know if I want to be here. I'm in so much pain and everything has fallen apart. And I just can't even, never mind vision-based living. I don't even know. I feel like I cannot breathe. Sometimes when we're in quite a deep grief and have so many things, and kind of like, what's the point on keep on fighting? What would your advice be in that situation? When people are in such a state, when things are in such a state that we're not even able to envision.
Well, first of all, I think we have to honor the grief process. I've certainly been there. A few years ago, my mom died. And shortly after that, my brother died. He struggled with mental health. And there's a part of us, I just think about even a seed in the ground in the winter. It feels like there's almost like this dormancy, we're in this, what's the word I want to say? This limbic phase of life, like nothing's happening. And so there's a part of me that says, you know what, honor that, call it out. How does it feel? And then sometimes it's just inviting this power breathing you. When you say, people sometimes can't breathe, our breath is a gift. We do nothing for. Often when we're going through some really challenging and difficult times, we don't breathe well. And we keep ourselves in our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight, and freeze. And so even techniques, just start loving yourself in the moment. Sometimes it can be maybe getting some coaching with breath work. Because again, when we align with the power breathing us, when we can shift our breath through even like long, deep inhalations and exhalations, when we're aligned with our breath, we can create the shift into our parasympathetic nervous system. So I believe, things that we can do just to help us in the moment. Yoga was a really beneficial practice for me, and I teach restorative yoga for trauma sensitive, support. So it's not about, having your ankles wrapped around your head. Sometimes it's learning to be able to just relax so fully that we can hear more than just the voice that's telling us that our life is painful, that it can't be any different. And then even having people to remember a time in their life when they felt incredibly healthy. So when I was doing my visioning exercise after my diagnosis, I just wrote down, and this was the other end of the spectrum. Did I believe it at first? Probably not. But I was invited, okay, if not this, then what? So I thought, well, what if I could see my kids at their graduation? Right now, my boys were small. They were in the primary grade. What if I was so healthy that I could run a marathon? What if I could pay off my mortgage and have some financial freedom? I had no idea how any of it was going to happen. And when I coach people, the most important thing is to realize that the how is none of your business. All we need to do, and you just shared this when you were talking, Birgitte, is that in the moment, what can I do in the moment? What might bring me some relief or release? Sometimes it's maybe even just joining in a cancer support group. And I have to say, one of the gifts that came from my diagnosis is my dearest friend was navigating cancer. I never would have met her if I hadn't been navigating it myself. So just the friendships, the kindness of people, one of the most powerful practices that I have developed, one of the things that I've come to know, deeply in my bones, is the power of gratitude. That in every day, there's something to be grateful for. And there have been days where I've just gone to bed and said, thank you that today is over and tomorrow I can push reset.
I love that. Sometimes I ran a gratitude group on Facebook, and sometimes many of us say, what are we doing? We didn't do everything perfectly, and things didn't go perfectly. But I love that. So there are, for most of us, for almost all of us, there are days when we say, you know what? Thank you. I love that. Thank you that this day is complete and everything is over. And then we start again tomorrow. And then you might feel crummy today, and there is tomorrow, and let's just go one moment at a time. Yes. And breathing is definitely, noticing your breath is definitely a very beautiful way to calibrate, like you say, to calibrate your nervous system. And for some of us, I notice, this is just a tip for our audience, some of us in such a state that we cannot even shift ourselves into breathing deeply, which is beneficial. And if you're able to do that, great. But if you're not able to shift yourself into breathing deeply because of any reason, perhaps because you're in front of a bunch of people and you don't want them to look at you funny, or perhaps you are having certain feelings that you just like, I cannot even reach the breathing deeply. You will be able to calibrate your nervous system just even by noticing your inhale and exhale. So you breathe normally, but you notice your inhale and notice your exhale, and notice your inhale and notice your exhale. Notice your inhale and notice your exhale, and just do that as you breathe, and do 5 to 7 cycle of that, and that will be able to help you to calibrate your nervous system, to feel calmer, to feel a little bit lighter if you're feeling really, really happy. It's just something that I use in my coaching. But I would agree with Lynn that if you are able to deep breathly, that's definitely be beneficial as well. Sometimes we just can't get to that place for some people, right? And so that is so beautiful. What you mentioned about your would you mind sharing again, what is your website and how do people connect with you?
It's Lynne, Lynnne, Harley, Harley, so no spaces, no dots.com. And there's a contact. You can contact me on my webpage. There's an email address, and I'm open and welcome if you have questions about my book or where I'm speaking. If you would love for me to speak to an organization that you're involved with, a group of people, any way that I can share my message, I'm more than happy to. This is really what I feel my reason for being is now, that this book felt incredibly inspired. And it's really just, this is how nature works. That's my message to people, is this is how nature works, and this is our nature. And we're the ones who stop that by the thoughts we choose to think, or we enhance it, either or. And I just want to quickly build on what you talked about, the breath. And you know this too, is that the present moment is always our point of power. And as long as you're either watching or connected to your breath, you're bringing yourself into the present moment, because we can't breathe in the past and we can't breathe in the future. And it's our thinking that usually takes us into the past, just as you shared. Well, I had 5 job interviews and they didn't turn out. Or it takes us into the future where we're thinking we're going to be sick because we're going in for cancer treatment, and the thinking is made us sick before we walk in. So, yeah.
I that is beautiful. Be present, and then many of us have heard the word overthinking, and I love how you shared it earlier as well, that natures don't sit there and think, do I want to grow the leaves? I wonder if I grow the leaves this direction, So the natures just do it, and so nature just does it, and so what if we allow ourselves, as Lynn says, just step in more, and yes, it's normal to think, but at the same time to perhaps direct our thinking into something that you love, something that you can envision instead of something that terrorizes you. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much. As we complete our time together today, do you have one final message for our listener?
Well, I probably have a few. First of all, there's so much power in gratitude. If you can start paying attention to what is going well in your life, you will attract more of that. I'm a firm believer in that. I see that in my world, in my life all the time. And I think that just to know that you are more resourced than you could ever imagine. There is a power that will take an acorn to an oak tree, a caterpillar to a butterfly. It's breathing us. It's there for you. You can't breathe on your own. And so I just believe that, if you can tap into that, and you know that you're never alone, because this is going to take you to the right and perfect people to the right and perfect resources and supports that you need if you really have a desire to live your best life, regardless of what condition is going on. And when I speak, I just think I've seen it in my life so many times. And if you don't fully believe it right now, then believe in my belief. That's what I would love to share with your listeners.
That's beautiful. If you cannot believe in yourself right now, then allow yourself to believe in Lynne's belief, as well as other people who has been through challenges and adversities and able to move forward and to thrive, not just survive, but thrive. Thank you so much, Lynne. Thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your amazing gift with us. I was so delighted and honored to have you with us today. And for our listener, for you, my friend, who listen to this, please share a gold nuggets or two that you gained from Lynne, so we can continue learning from each other. Oh, that's the cover of the book. Yes. What if you could? Isn't that the cutest cover? Oh, that is so adorable.
Just if people are looking, yeah, if people are looking, they'll recognize it from that photo.
Yes, that is adorable. It's the cutest caterpillar, I would say. So, and sounds like it's a book. Yes, it's created as a children's book, but it sounds like it's a book that's suitable whether you are 4 or 8 or 84 years old or 48 years old. So that is beautiful. So you want to go check that out. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, also share 1 or 2 gold nuggets with us. And so we can continue learning from each other, and also share this with your loved ones, with your friends and families, because we all deserve and want to thrive. And I thank you very much for joining us today. This is Dr. BirgitteTan with the International Childhood Cancer Charity and your grief specialist. And I see that you have a beautiful week, and I look forward